position of giving a prediction, a political or an electoral prediction, who is likely to win this year's elections when you put the pieces together?
In the absence of vote manipulation, my prediction is that it's almost impossible for the president of Zambia today to candidate in the election. I think that Brian Munduvilan is going to win the election. And I'm not making this prediction because I support Brian. I do not. And I do not actually support any candidate, presidential candidate, in this year's election. I'm making this prediction based purely on account of two things. One is the failure of the incumbent on his major policy proposals that we discussed earlier. When people fail to do what they promised to do, voters respond by identifying a vehicle that they can use to get rid of what they don't want. In my view, that decision of who to vote out Ichirema was made by many people some time back because the threshold of frustrations, of grievances was crossed long ago. What was missing was the identification of a vehicle that they could use to get rid of what they don't want. I'm not very happy that this is how we choose leaders, where you focus on voting out rather than scrutinizing the person you're replacing that leader with. But the president of Zambia has driven people to a position where it's anybody but Hichilema that they have considered. And Munduvile has been identified as the recipient of that revulsion against the incumbent. Outright opposition to one candidate, rather than genuine support for the candidate voted for, is increasingly becoming the norm across democracies in the world. People vote for leaders not because they support that leader, but because they don't support the incumbent president who is there, because the incumbent president has done very, very bad things. I voted for Hichilema in 2021, not because I believe that the man was a transformative leader. In fact, if you go back my Twitter handles of pre-2021, I made it very clear that Edgar Lungu had failed and they need to go, and that I would vote for Hichilema. But I think that for me, the greatest legacy of Hichilema will be elected will be that Etonga has been elected president of Zambia. I didn't have sufficient faith that HH would be a transformative leader, and the last 5 years, for example, have not proved me wrong. His performance in office has led to a scenario where many people are considering voting for Munduvile, not because he's the best candidate to the ballot or the one with a very good manifesto, but because he is seen as the person who is better placed to win. Of course, you have to give it to Munduvile also. He has a political experience, having served as provincial minister for a long time, having served as chief whip for a long time, served as leader of the opposition for a long time, and indeed having served as a member of parliament. So he is not a novice, for example. I hear HH sometimes making the claim that, these are thieves, for example. You had 5 years. If you want to be in Makebi store, the right thing to do was not to wait until they're challenging you to say they are thieves. You should have arrested them and prosecuted them so that they can be punished for stealing from Zambian people. When you raise these concerns now at the 11th hour, where they are seen as the front runners, for example, people are likely to dismiss your concerns, even if assuming it's genuine, as evidence of a leader who is uncomfortable that suddenly he might lose power and is trying to discredit his opponents, for example. It's very important that leaders learn lessons that even if you try to dismantle the opposition the way HH tried to do over the last 5 years, I think he concentrated more on dismantling his opponent rather than governing, which explains why the PF is not on the ballot, why the MMD is not on the ballot, why UNIP is not on the ballot, why Sean Tembo's party is not on the ballot, why John Sangwa's party was not even registered, for example, they were blocked from registration. The aim of those actions to prevent the emergence of an opposition. What the president forgot was that the opposition is not a political party. It is the people. The people were always going to identify a vehicle to use as a vehicle for expressing their frustrations. And they have done that, I think, in Washington. If you look at the rallies that this guy is pulling, it's a huge turnout, for example. The kind of the kind of turnout you have seen speaks to the disappointment that people feel toward the president. That's why I said earlier that this election will be a referendum on delivery, not on new promises. I genuinely believe that if is not is held in a transparent manner, one where A, you have parallel voter tabulation, for example. B, there will be no internet shutdown, for example, throughout the period of voting and counting, for example. And 3, the servers of the Electoral Commission will not be tampered with, for example, and people are free to to monitor the election properly, to engage in voter tabulation. I think it's high time we got used to saying former President Hakainde Hichilema. So in that sense, I would say that Mundugile is a better place to win as a prediction. But I'm saying that is only possible if, for example, there's vote protection, and I hope that the opposition are able to do that, and that he may win, not because he's the best on the ballot, but because voters have identified him as the vehicle for raising their frustrations against President Hichilema. I should end by making the point that you see, IP, in a sense, the failure of the president is self-inflicted. All he needed to do over the last 5 years was to do the opposite of what Edgar Lungu did. Zambians were very emphatic in giving HH the victory that they gave him in 2021. So it was about almost 60%, 59%. He has abused that goodwill that people vote him to disappoint them on major policy issues, including those that we discussed, for example. He had the whole nation to draw a team of people to help shape his presidency. But he chose to surround himself with, yes men and the praise singers, for example. And the result is what you have seen. If Mundubira and his friend win power, I do hope that one of the key things they should do, in addition to creating a professional civil service, which HH promised but failed to deliver, is to appoint men and women who are competent, where they come from, notwithstanding, to surround him at State House. It's very important to have those people around you who are not there because they have no alternative job, they have no education that could help them secure alternative jobs, who are not there because they are people who praise, who are, what's the word, like sycophants who just support whatever you do. You need independent men and women who can tell a leader that, sir, you are wrong, for example, but you also need to have a cabinet that reflects competence rather than loyalty. If you look at Luba's first cabinet, it had elements of these. We buried the guy Scott recently, but he was just one of the many good men and women with experience, with the successful lives before politics that ended up in cabinet. I remember people like Roger Chongwe, people like Emmanuel Kasonde, people like Akashamba the Big Story Wanika, Kelly Waluvita, Ronald Penza, Levi Manawasa, you name them. These are men and women who had built successful careers away from politics, and they had a fallback option in case politics didn't go according to plan. That's why some of them, like Roger Chongwe, Rodrick Sondashi, Levi Manawasa, Simon Zukas, Deepak Patel, they resigned when Chiluba was doing the wrong things because politics was a matter of life and death for them. It's very important that we bring back that culture where you identify good talent, competence across ethnic groups so that you can deploy them for public good.
Right.
It's not enough to simply say, I have appointed UPND MPs. It's important that you reflect that diversity that is required by the Constitution, regional diversity, and that you do in a manner that rewards competence and integrity and independence judgment rather than sycophants, for example.
All right.
If the election is free and